1.
Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, November 8th. Welcome to the Transportation and Environment Committee. And today we are going to have a work session learning about our electric vehicle charging infrastructure, recognizing how important our EV infrastructure is to making sure that we reduce greenhouse gas emissions and fully embrace the technological advancements that are happening all around us, make sure that we are tapping into state and federal resources to upgrade not only our fleets, but make sure that our residents are also able to purchase these vehicles and accommodate all of the not only electrical needs and technical needs, but also the regulatory needs. It's something that we've been talking about over the last number of years. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago where we passed a regulation that allowed for charging stations in right-of-ways. And so we'll see how that is going. I've heard from people about how it's going, so I'll share those thoughts during this conversation. But you know, the reality is that the demand is increasing, and that I can say from my first person account, waiting nearly 5 months for the EV that I finally got. And so I know that people want EVs, but there is also, what's the term? Not charging fatigue, but charging fear, right? Battery anxiety, I think is what it is. Yes, exactly. And so this conversation will hopefully relieve any anxiety that people have, knowing that, so that they know they can buy electric vehicles and travel safely and efficiently and full of power here in Montgomery County. And before we start today's conversation, I do want to welcome our new climate change officer, Ms. Kogel-Smucker. Thank you. Welcome to your first count. Hit the button.
Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Fantastic. We will be seeing a lot of you, and today is just the first conversation. So with that, colleagues, anyone have any opening comments? We'll turn it over to staff. Mr. Lipchenko, Mr. Kenny.
Hi, yeah, before we get started in the briefing, just wanted to highlight a few things in the packet just for context. And Mr. Glass, you just mentioned the fact that we're going to be coming back for some climate action plan related items. We do have a briefing on the 27th for this committee on that. And I did want to put this in the context of the climate action plan. I noted in the packet that transportation ranks as the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. And I think in the climate action plan itself, it was about 42% of the emissions calculated at the time of that plan. So it's a significant piece of the pie. And within the climate action plan, there's a number of recommendations, and they include, of course, the EV charging infrastructure. But I also want to note it's not just about EV charging, it's also about mode shifting and reducing vehicle miles traveled and things like that. So it's a complex mix of recommendations and impacts on the transportation side. And then you take a step back, you also have the impacts on the grid. And the Climate Action Plan had a number of recommendations for greening the grid. Certainly, if you're going to move things to electrification, both in the transportation sector and the building sector, you want the grid to be green. So there are a number of recommendations for that, and I've noted them in the plan. Most notably, the Community Choice Energy Program that is currently before the Public Service Commission work group. Legislation has already been passed through the state, and we're part of a pilot effort, but we're still trying to get that off the ground. And of course, increased use of solar energy generation in the county, and ultimately adoption by the state of a 100% renewable energy portfolio standard. So those are all elements to green the grid. Then you also have the issue of grid capacity. Obviously, with electrification of buildings and with more use of EV technology, you're going to have a lot more grid impact. And some of it can be offset through battery storage, perhaps even in the very EVs that we're talking about, especially buses. I noted there's a recent article that I've referenced in the packet. But ultimately, we will need to look at issues such as further energy conservation, and the BEPS law that the council passed last year is a big element of that for existing buildings to try to reduce the need for the grid for existing electricity while also electrifying. and then, of course, all these transportation recommendations that I mentioned. So it is a complex puzzle. This is an important piece of it, but I did want to provide that broader view going into this. So with that, I'll turn it over to the folks at the table to introduce themselves and get into the briefing today.
Very good. Let's start with Mr. Dice.
Hi, David Dice, Director, Department of General Services, and joining me at the table today is Calvin Jones, Chief of Fleet Management.
Good morning. Calvin Jones, Division Chief Fleet Management Services.
Good morning, Sarah Kogel-Smucker, Montgomery County's Climate Change Officer.
And good morning, Brian Boer, Senior Planning Specialist for Zero Emission Vehicles with Department of Environmental Protection.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I see a PowerPoint presentation ready to go, so I'll turn it over to one of you to walk us through it.
Great, thank you. I'm going to start and turn over to my colleagues. Again, thank you very much for the welcome, and this is hopefully the first of many fruitful conversations about implementing and expanding and strengthening the Climate Action Plan. As I mentioned, I'm Montgomery County's Climate Change Officer, and as the council members know, this is a position in the executive to lead implementation of the county's Climate Action Plan, envisioning a whole of government approach, thus in the county executive's office. And the plan is to meet our ambitious climate change goals. So that's really the mandate of the position, and the only way to do it is going to be in partnership with everyone. So I'm really looking forward to that and very honored to be here. But the topic for today, and thank you for calling attention to such a critical part of the climate solutions here, which is EV charging and EV preparedness. As mentioned before, the county has ambitious climate change goals of 80% emissions reductions from baseline by 2027, 100% by 2035. And as Mr. Lenchenko said, 42% of the emissions comes from transportation, and the plan anticipates that around 29% of the emissions reductions from transportation that we need is from fuel switching. So taking fossil fuel powered vehicles, switching them to electric, and around 6% comes from mode switch, getting people out of their personal vehicles and into biking, walking, and mass transit. It's a living document, so if we can get even more people more often biking, walking, and mass transit, all the better. But the 29% on EVs is a critical piece of meeting these goals.
Let me just jump in
Sure.
real quick so that we all understand that 29% you're speaking of. Is the 29% of the 42%, or if the 42% were 100%, 29%, right?
The latter.
It's the latter. Oh, so nearly 1/3 of the transportation reductions would come from switching to EV.
No, one-third of our overall emissions reductions.
Overall, got it, okay.
So it's a critical
Yeah, it
piece
is.
of the puzzle.
Very good.
But thank you for clarifying.
Highlighting even more so how important this is.
Absolutely. Thank you for clarifying. But, climate solutions should lead us better off in the end. We're making major societal transformations, and we should be doing it in a way that improves our communities, makes us more comfortable, it makes it easier to get around, and makes it more equitable, so addresses historic inequities of the past. And so in EVs, in terms of why EVs, yes, greenhouse gas emissions, but then also, as you see on this slide, importantly, zero tailpipe pollution. So, if anyone who's stood by an idling vehicle or has lived on a busy street knows that that's a huge benefit, even if you never drive a car yourself. And then also lower cost of ownership from electricity and maintenance costs. So it is at this time a higher upfront cost, but there's lower overall costs and hopefully easier maintenance of your vehicle long term. And then convenient charging at home, work, and destinations. As much as people absolutely love going to the gas station and having to delay their trips, when we get this whole infrastructure in place, it's going to be much more convenient and much more integrated into our daily lives in the places that we are going already. So that's an important benefit. So timeline, when do we need them? We have nation-leading climate change goals, and as well we should, because we have the will, we have the means, we have the innovation, we can pave the way that others can follow, but it creates tight timelines. So those three things on the slide are the targets in the climate action plan to meet the goals. So it's 100% zero emission transportation options, including all public and private vehicles by 2035. So to flag that zero emission transportation, the vast majority of that is likely electric, but it could also be hydrogen, as long as it's from renewable sources. And then reduce private vehicle trips from 75% of total trips with a 2018 baseline level to 60%. So this is the mode shift and also reduction in overall trips. And then double the proportion of bus, rail, and bicycle trips over the 2018 baseline level by 2035. So that's the mode shift. The previous one is reduction, which is everything from having more efficient trips to teleworking, for example. And then, as Mr. Langchenko importantly highlighted, the Climate Action Plan has a number of specific recommendations on how we're going to do that. And we broke them up between vehicle electrification, that top part of the slide, which is the subject of this briefing, and the public transit and driving alternatives, which is incredibly important, but not the subject of this briefing. And we want to flag that there's more actions on advocacy and public engagement, which is going to be an essential piece of this overall transformation. So it's not just doing the work ourselves, putting in the infrastructure in place. It's also reaching out to county residents and participants so that they're empowered to make the change themselves. So that's the overview, and to turn it over to the details.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you, council members. Again, my name is Brian Boer. I'm the Senior Planning Specialist for Zero Emission Vehicles with DEP. And so we will talk today about the state of the market as it exists for EVs and some of the things that we are trying to do to expand EV charging infrastructure and meet some of the objectives needed to meet these goals that Sarah laid out for the Climate Action Plan. And I'd like to start with just some level setting, EV 101, for the benefit of anybody listening at home. Electric vehicles, the difference between electric vehicles and gas vehicles is that they are powered by a rechargeable battery. You also have a plug-in hybrid vehicle that also has gasoline as well as the rechargeable battery. The full battery electric vehicles, they can go, the new ones that are available on the market today are over 200 miles on a charge. So, your day-to-day driving for vast majority of people can be covered on, the standard EV batteries. Most people drive 30 to 40 miles a day. So the size of that battery is what is giving you that range, and just plug-in hybrids have a smaller battery, but many people driving plug-in hybrids can get by with just their battery range for their daily driving. And then we're going to talk about EV charging, and so there's 3 different levels of EV charging that differ based on the speed at which they charge that battery, and some of these terms might come up. So level 1 is the slow charging that you plug into a normal household outlet. It's going to be very slow, maybe 5 miles of range for every hour that you're charging. Level 2 gets you 20 to 30 miles of range, and that's typically what we'll see in a parking garage or maybe a public facility or shopping center. People will charge with level 2. And then level 3, also called DC fast charging, that's that fast charging that is needed for highways and also around the community. You want to have that fast charging to recharge your battery in half an hour or maybe up to an hour, depending on how much you need to go. So the market for electric vehicles in Montgomery County is growing very, very fast. The chart on the left shows the total number of vehicle registrations, and the font is a little small, but it shows the total number of vehicle registrations from 2021 until last month, until September of last month. From the beginning of 2021, we've seen an 150% increase in the number of plug-in vehicles on the road, and about 70% of them, that's the dark green line, are full battery electric vehicles. So most of the vehicles that we're seeing are full battery electric vehicles. And the chart on the right is the number of the increase in newly registered vehicles each month. And as you can see, we're hitting a new high almost every month. And I suspect before the end of the year, we're going to crack 1,000 additional registered vehicles in a month, which will be a nice milestone showing the progress. But the point is that we are increasing at an increasing rate. And what this is going to mean is that very soon we're going to see a much larger number of electric vehicles on the road and needing to be charged. Right now, there's about 3% of all vehicles registered are electric vehicles. This slide is going to show that on the left is the number of new plug-in vehicles that might be registered each year under a couple different scenarios. The green line on the bottom is if we continue with the trend that we've seen over the last 3 years, this increasing rate, we're seeing an increasing rate. If that continues on trend, that's the number of sales we'll see. Maybe reaching 20,000 sales by 2028 or so. But there's a couple other things. There's a Maryland state requirement. The legislature adopted a standard based on California called Advanced Clean Cars 2, and that's actually going to accelerate EV adoption. It requires manufacturers to sell more EVs. So the blue line in the middle is the Maryland state requirement. And understanding that, with our goal to get to 100% zero-emission vehicles as quickly as possible, we believe that we should set our sights even higher with a higher target adoption goal, faster target adoption goal that would get us 50% of all newly registered vehicles by 2025. I think this year will probably be about 15% of all newly registered vehicles in Montgomery County are going to be plug-in electric, so getting to 50% by 2025 and then increasing from there. And if this holds, if these trends hold, we will start to see, by 2030, over 100,000 vehicles, maybe 200,000 plug-in vehicles on the road, and even more so by 2035. And so this is going to have some pretty major implications for the amount of charging that we will need. And
Just to jump in, and I welcome colleagues to jump in as we're going through this because I think it's important in real time. Based on this slide, it's true I assume it's true that Montgomery County leads the state in EV adoption, and that's why our numbers are much higher.
Yeah, there's about 84,000 plug-in vehicles in the state. We have 26,000. One thing just to note that even if these pretty aggressive adoption trends, we're just getting to 100% of all newly registered vehicles by 2035. That's not to say that all the vehicles on the road will be plug-in. If these trends hold, still it would only be in the most aggressive scenario, about half of the the vehicles on the road will be plug-in. So what does this mean for the amount of charging that we need? There is the US DOE, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, has a model where you can plug in the size of a fleet and estimate how much charging will be needed of different kinds. The growth in the EV market is dependent on having enough charging to sustain those vehicles on the road. We're not going to see high rates of adoption if people are frustrated by the charging experience. So we expect to need a large increase in the charging infrastructure across all of these categories: private workplaces, multi-unit dwellings, public level 2 and public level 3. And right now in the county, there are 64 public level 2 ports at Montgomery County government parking facilities. There's also a number of public ports that were installed and operated by the utilities in the area. There's still a few more, especially level 3 ports that Pepco is bringing online that are in various stages of that. So I think we are on track looking at the rate of increase for level 3 charging to hit that 2025 number of about 200 charging ports. But I think that it's going to be a challenge to meet the amount of private workplace and especially multi-unit dwelling charging that we're going to see. Just a quick note about private workplace. The reason, you see so much of that, even though we talk about EV charging at home, this model is forward-looking and takes into account the need for the grid to have reliable charging, and we want people to be able to charge during the day and not only load up the grid with demand when they're charging at home at night. So if you have more charging at workplaces, that's going to have a healthier grid over the long term.
Before we go on to the next one, can I ask, it says at the bottom, this assumes 70% of drivers have access to home charging. Is that home charging at single-family homes, or how are we defining home charging? Because I know, and we'll talk about this more, about access in multi-unit dwellings.
It is including both multi-unit dwelling and single-family charging. I don't know what the percentage of drivers who have access to home charging is today, or even maybe you have access to home charging but you haven't taken the step to install a home charger. Something that we can continue to study and understand about EV drivers in the area. That's a input into the model that can be tweaked, and we actually have a technical assistance meeting with NREL in a couple weeks to dive deeper into this model and understand a little bit better what some of the variables are.
Just a point of clarification, this is a national figure, 70%, or is that local?
That's a local figure. So this is assuming if there are, for 2025, 50,000 vehicles in Montgomery County, then this is the number of charging we'll need. One thing to note, it says EV charging in our region. We know that drivers are going all around our region for their final destinations, where they work, where they're visiting. This is the amount of charging that needed to sustain the size of that fleet that is registered in Montgomery County. So some of these chargers, these workplace chargers, public chargers, might be located outside the county, but we should expect that a significant amount of infrastructure will be needed in the county.
And that 64 does not include other county facilities, just parking garages?
Yeah, that's just the parking garages. So I think
we
the
have
DGS facilities.
We have parking, we have chargers at libraries and rec centers and some of the county facilities as well. We'll talk about that later.
Yes, so thank you. This was my number one question, was where we are. So what I don't understand about this table is if the number of plug-in vehicles, the market today, 26,000, 2025, 50,000, the need for the ports or the charging stations are a significant jump. So does that mean that we are not servicing the vehicles on the road today?
I think in many cases, yes, especially if you don't have home charging. I think the stories that we hear from drivers is that, they're frustrated by the reliability of the infrastructure that's out there, not necessarily the infrastructure in public facilities, but just general public charging infrastructure not being enough. They're not being reliable enough. And we're still at this point with 3% of vehicles on the road where a lot of these problems can be glossed over. You need to find charging, and you're not going to find a completely full charging bank. You're going to be able to make it work. But as you get more and more vehicles on the road and there's more competition for that, I think what will happen is people will begin to be more frustrated by the experience, and hopefully not, but they may go back to driving gas cars.
Yeah, that's my biggest concern, is that the experience, if current drivers are experiencing frustration, then from a word of mouth marketing it's insurmountable because people are going to just simply say, this just doesn't work for me. So I'm assuming we're going to get into what's our plan for building this out.
Absolutely.
And if I could just pick up on those questions. There are 26,000 EVs in the county. Do we know how many permits have been provided by Pepco for at-home charging stations?
I don't know about Pepco, but I did get the figures from DPS.
Sure,
And
sure,
there's,
sure.
Just under 4,000, and the vast majority of those single-family residents. So just under 4,000 permits issued for.
So there is a huge disparity between EVs out there and individuals actually charging at their home. So they're relying, to this greater point, they're relying on the infrastructure that we're trying to build out.
And just, we don't necessarily see the folks who are using level 1 at home. So they didn't
That's-
need to go permit and.
My neighbor does use a level
Yeah,
one.
so I think
that's a very
many,
good
many
point, yes.
drivers use the level
Yeah.
1 because it is.
If you have an exterior outlet, you have a level 1 charger, so but it is anecdotally, those are some of the challenges we face. We were talking before the meeting began that one of the complaints we get as the operator and owner of county facilities is people saying there's a car parked in the charging spot that has been there for 12 hours. Can you move it? There's, people using the county charging facilities as if they don't have one at home and have an electric car, they'll just park their car in a county lot and walk away. And we have a finite number of spots. So, and we'll talk later about what we're doing in response to Councilmember Balcom's observation. The reality is the infrastructure is not up to speed to the projected demand and needs to be. There's only so much the government can do. This is something the private sector needs to embrace as well.
Sure, and I appreciate your allusion to this broader conversation in a bit, but I just want to put a pin on what you just said, that I am aware of county-operated charging stations. Some charge and some don't, right? I think the Parks doesn't charge, but we charge. So I think there are internal parameters which we need to look at. That's right, Mr. Jones, you were thinking, yeah.
Well, Parks doesn't fall under us, but I was surprised to hear that Parks didn't charge. For us, it's always been a balancing act, right, with regard to making sure that the electricity that they use was affordable, but not giving away county resource. So it's so it's interesting, but policy would help us a lot in that particular realm.
So to the point of what are we going to do to meet this challenge, DEP is working with other departments and regional partners to develop a plan for the rapid electrification of vehicles and make sure it can be sustained over the long term. So here are some of the objectives that can be part of this plan. First and foremost, accelerating that private sector ZEV adoption so we can rapidly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And then we want to ensure that ZEV adoption is racially and socioeconomically equitable. We want to make sure that we're not leaving anybody behind or making sure that people don't that have the opportunity and choice to go electric if that's what they want to do. And then we need to ensure that this charging infrastructure is both reliable and accessible, and that we are doing things that support the long-term adoption and long-term carbon emissions of transportation electrification. So continuing to engage with utilities around greening the grid and everything like that. But the big barriers to achieving these goals, Sarah mentioned, the vehicles are still too expensive. The price parity between a gas car and an electric car is getting closer. With the federal tax credits, electric cars are more affordable, but that is not the easiest thing to navigate sometimes. The lack of EV charging at home, especially for multifamily properties, that's a big challenge. Reliability of charging infrastructure. To come to a charging station and plug in and have it not work is one of the most frustrating things that you can do. It's not, sometimes you have to actually get in your car and drive somewhere else, or even just move a parking space is very frustrating to do if anyone has experienced that. And then finally, there's a lot more that we can be doing to raise awareness and help people experience electric vehicles, help people see what it means to charge and understand how that works, so that people can see themselves driving an electric car. And so the strategy to pursue these objectives, we have a variety of complementary strategies that we can engage with across the government and also with our community partners. And it starts with engagement. We want to help, like I said, help residents experience EVs, understand what their needs are, where they want to see charging, where it would be most beneficial to themselves and, maybe their business, they own a business. We also are engaging with our regional partners like the Metro Washington Council of Government to work with them in concert in this planning. They are currently doing an exercise to make some market projections around electric vehicles, so that'll be another data point that we can see. Also looking for those opportunities to work together on grant applications. Drawing your attention to the bubble in the top left, a number of different programs concepts that we can pursue, starting with expanding community charging at public facilities and at commercial properties. I'm going to talk a lot more about how we're going to use federal grant funding and other resources to try to expand that and to work within the community, put those in the places where it's needed the most. But beyond the federal grant funding, there is a need for technical support and maybe additional incentives for multifamily properties and workplaces that aren't necessarily public charging to meet those needs. We'll spend some time talking about the EV Purchasing Co-op, which is the cornerstone of our outreach and engagement effort currently. And then we're also pursuing concepts like an EV car share that means you don't have to purchase your own personal electric vehicle. And then looking at some of this specialty modes, like food trucks or lawn equipment that are being electrified, make sure we can pay attention to that. E-bikes are on there. Interestingly enough, e-bikes are outselling electric vehicles in the U.S. So more electric bikes are selling than electric vehicles. So it is something really popular. It's something that meets a lot of needs and gets people out of personal cars. It's really important to do something there. And then there are a number of rules and regulations, some of which the county has adopted, some of which are adopted at the state level, and some of which we still need to work through the policy to make sure that we can have all of the pieces in place. So the big opportunity is around federal infrastructure funding. In the bipartisan infrastructure law, or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, there was $7.5 billion of funding over a period of 5 years, and that's broken into two different buckets. $5 billion of that will be administered by the states through the NEVI formula. State of Maryland is going to get about $65 million of that $5 billion. State of Maryland has not yet released the RFP to start spending that money, hoping they will do that soon. Then there's a separate program called the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant Program. That's $2.5 billion, and local governments are eligible entities for that. They released the first notice of funding opportunity earlier this year for $700 million. And we pursued a grant application there. And we actually pursued two different grant applications, one of which we led at the county, called that Charge Montgomery. We worked very closely with DGS, MCDOT, MCPS, and the city of Rockville to select sites and develop the application. Just one clarification about the grant programs. There is the community grant charging and corridor grant charging. Corridor just refers to locations that are within 1 mile of a highway. So that's the interstate fast charging network. The community charging program can be both fast charging and level 2 charging out in the community. Between both grants, I'll mention the Maryland Equitable Charging Infrastructure Partnership. That was led by the Maryland Clean Energy Center, and there were a number of private partners that were on board of that application, and also a number of other jurisdictions participating. Between the two programs, we have 40 county sites that we're proposed and about 216 ports, I think 216 ports of both level 3 and level 2. And fingers crossed, this grant will be announced at the end of the year. So how did we select these sites? It is a balance between many different factors. One, you have to have the property available, and that property has to be feasible to install charging. We want to look at where people are going already, where there is demand for that charging, a highly used location. Make sure we're filling gaps between where that is missing existing charging, providing home charging access where it's not available, ensuring access for underserved communities. We also want to be responsive to the preferences of local community members. We put out a survey in February of this year. We got about just under 600 responses about preferences related to charging, locations related to charging that people would like to see. We didn't get all of those responses in before we needed to turn in the grant application, but this will be a multi-year process that we are attempting to connect people's charging needs to the infrastructure in the county. Next, of course, we want to support fleet operations and help make sure that the public charging network is complementary to what the fleet is trying to do. And then finally, we know there's a variety of planning, transportation, public health, and climate-related priorities that we are pursuing as a county. So we don't want the pursuit of electric vehicles to get in the way of some of the other things related to pedestrian safety and other major efforts that we're pursuing. The details are small here, but the blue dots are existing charging sites, and the purple dots are where community members suggested wanting to see sites. One thing you'll notice just of the pattern is that there is still interest in having charging, even if there's a lot of other charging nearby. And that, I think, reflects that, these are popular areas to go, popular destinations, but also that, it's not the same to just have charging a block or two away. That doesn't necessarily meet someone's needs. So, a lot of places where people would like to see charging. And then the CFI grant, the Charging Fueling Infrastructure Grant, had selection criteria that encouraged us to look at equity areas in the county and site charging in such a way that it would meet demand for underserved locations. The shaded areas of this map are three different equity-related metrics that are used by Montgomery Planning, MWCOG, as well as the Justice 40 initiative from the White House to designate areas that are underserved or have had a larger environmental impact on those communities. And what you see is you get these contiguous areas of the county, more lower, moderate income areas of the county, where if we combine all these metrics together, we can see, okay, this is where we want to try to make sure there is infrastructure for the people who live there. And again, you probably can't see all the little dots on that map, but we have attempted to spread out the proposed sites across the county in a lot of different types. This is another summary table of the kinds of sites that we looked at. There are fast charging hubs, and I think Director Dice will be able to talk a little bit about sort of what the idea behind these fast charging hubs and the support of the fleet, but these will be places where there would be 12 level 3 charging ports that would really be able to meet the long-term demand for charging at those locations. An example of that is this design mock-up of the potential COB garage fast charging location would take the place of the existing structure that's there.
Yeah, let me explain that. We have plans to take this really lovely example of 1960s fueling infrastructure down here at the corner and raise it to the ground and replace it with electric charging. And that's in the plans right now.
The building at the corner?
The old fueling facility.
Yep.
Just-
Oh, the fueling facility, okay.
Oh, not the bank building. Not yet.
I was going to say, I know lots of different conversations about the bank building, so I didn't know what you were
We'll have-
committing to right now.
Trust me, we'll have a conversation.
I look forward to that conversation. Okay, but the fueling facility, thank you.
And just, mention parking garages, many of those parking garages are in Silver Spring. There is existing charging on site there, but we know that there are, 4,000 sessions a month at public charging facilities, or public parking, and we need more. These are highly utilized, so there is demand for more. Park and ride lots to consider how to make the best use of these spaces that many of us are along highways. And then working with the city of Rockville, they identified a number of different locations that were curbside adjacent to lower and moderate income multifamily buildings, so would be servicing the residents of those buildings. And then finally, working with MCPS, they identified 4 sites that they wanted to pursue. And then we have 16 other libraries, rec centers, and other service facilities to have charging. So this was an ambitious proposal, we feel, and hopefully we get the best result possible. You saw on that list, what was missing from there was commercial buildings, private shopping centers and other private properties that we know that's where people are spending a significant amount of time. So how can we help those private facilities expand the charging needed that supports the whole network? The problem that these properties face is that charging is a major construction. It's not just, plug in this charger at this parking space. It is a major construction effort. It sometimes is very difficult to see how you can do that in the scope of a limited parking layout, especially in common ownership communities that have assigned parking, that have limited options about how they can move parking around. And then once you have the parking and the charging in the ground, there's an ongoing need, an administrative cost, a need for maintenance for that charging equipment to continue working. And then one challenge is that the incentives that exist out right now are unreliable or incomplete. And that's from the utilities, the state, or federal government. And then finally, many property owners say, why would I install charging today? Nobody drives an EV in my community. Why would I charge EV? So we have a chicken and the egg situation. I mentioned a little bit about the incentives that are available from the utility and state. Montgomery County Green Bank has a technical assistance program, low-cost financing. That is a tremendous asset. They have helped dozens of properties in the area with a study to look at the electrical infrastructure that they need to expand and help understand how they should install the charging, and then they can get low-cost financing. So having the Montgomery County Green Bank in the county is a fantastic asset. It really puts us foot forward, but a lot of the Green Bank's financing really assumes that you're going to be getting some incentives back, utility and state incentives back. Unfortunately, the utilities in the area are winding down the incentives that are currently offering. They need to have new programs approved by the Public Service Commission, and we're not certain yet what they're going to look like beginning in 2024. There's indication they want to move to what's called a make-ready incentive, where they wouldn't actually incentivize the equipment. They would just incentivize some of the electrical improvements needed on the site. And then the state of Maryland has a program called the EV Supply Equipment Rebate, EVSC Rebate. Checked last night, and that program has expended all of its funding for the year. So it got new funding in July, and it ran out just at the beginning of November. So they have a high demand for that program. It's 50% off the cost, up to $5,000, but they run out of their money pretty soon. They ran out of money soon last fiscal year as well.
Can I go back to sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, can I just go back to the Green Bank and the technical assistance they provide? Could you tell a little bit more about that in terms of, like, how small of a project? Because when I think about the Green Bank, I think of larger projects in our community. And what I'm hearing from is a lot of residents in multifamily buildings or the common ownership looking for they're like, how do we do this? Is the Green Bank assisting at that level?
Absolutely, they are. The question is how much that technical assistance is subsidized. They can subsidize that technical assistance in equity areas, but outside of designated equity areas, they can provide less assistance or no assistance at all. And that is, that is one of the main things that when people come to me to ask, hey, what can I do? I always connect them with the Green Bank, and they're often able to help. Sometimes the technical challenges are go beyond just needing technical assistance, but the Green Bank's able to help a lot of communities like that.
Piggyback on that? Thank you, and thank you for that question. We're hearing that as well. I think there's the difference in the cost. Of course, a lot of our communities need help with the cost, but many communities don't even know where to start. And I think that when you look at community engagement, one of the low-hanging fruit would be to provide HOAs, apartments, the multifamily, whether it's a common ownership, to look at how to even start. And I think that would be helpful. That would certainly be helpful for us because we get questions all the time about how this works.
Absolutely. We held a webinar last September, so it's been a while, but we held a webinar last September that was really highly attended, and people are still contacting us about it, and we are developing a set of materials, handout to at least give the entry, and then here's the next steps that you can take. So hopefully we can get that out into the community soon, and we want to, I think it also is important to, learn from the common ownership communities about where they are in the process and what they've tried to do so far, yeah.
And also, just to play on the webinar is great, but I recently started listening to DPS does podcasts. I don't know if, and they are super helpful in their interview format. They're short, but sort of explaining some of the processes at DPS. And so I don't know if DEP has thought about that type of model too. But anyway, in terms of engagement.
Yeah.
You've just made me add another podcast to my list.
Yeah,
I did
it's
not
actually
know
really interesting.
that DPS had a podcast.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'll listen to that after the daily.
Yeah.
So appreciate those questions. Really, people don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Right? With regard, and I think we're going to get into this, but with regard to a lot of the common ownership communities, there is no preemption, right? The residents do not have to adhere to the local covenants or the local HOA rules that might prohibit, right? I'm pretty sure the state said you cannot prohibit EV charging stations within HOAs, right? I have to presume.
There is a right to charge law, and what that means is they can't unreasonably restrict it, but what we've seen is there are still a number of reasonable restrictions that people have experienced, and just sometimes some managements have delayed the process, and the law actually requires you can't just delay and delay, but it still is, at the end of the day, something that is going to require, you can't necessarily just do it out of your own pocket. It's going to require shared infrastructure in the community. It's going to have to cut across a sidewalk, and it makes it complicated if the management isn't on board wanting to do it. It's really hard for someone to.
We'll look into that as we start getting ready for state legislative session. But yeah, and I'll turn it over to Councilmember Balcom in a sec. The other question I have was on private properties. There are a number of charging stations, that are privately, national charging stations. Do we collect or request any data from them regarding usage, something that can be informative of the deployment of future stations?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't have a way to get that data. We could maybe request it and see what they'd be willing to share, but that's something I can look into, yeah.
Yeah, I ask it because before I got a level 2 charger at my home, I was looking around. I would use the one at the county facility and the council office building, which is pay, right? So we paid for that. And then sometimes when I would take the metro into DC, I would charge it at the Blair Shopping Center. There's a number of charging stations there, so I'd plug it in, pay for it, and take the metro. And I'm curious because, downtown Silver Spring is one of the areas where there's a lot that's supposed to, for future growth. And I'm curious whether a lot of them are DC residents, Montgomery County residents. Again, the utilization, I think, would be informative as we look in the future. So might be something to reach out and ask for. Certainly. Okay. Councilmember Balcom.
I was just going to say about the restriction in the communities. So there's a great difference between single-family homes and townhomes, apartments, condos. And from a realistic perspective, if you don't have a single-family home, you don't own the property outside of townhomes or condos. You don't own that property. And so the restriction is if you owned property, you're unrestricted, but you don't own that property. So that rule of saying you can't restrict only really effectively works for single-family homes. And so we're seeing in a lot of our communities are a mix of, certainly up in my district, single families, townhomes, and so we're missing a significant portion here. And that's the issue of trying to figure out HOAs, large and small, all over the county are trying to figure out how to make this work equitably. We've got the issue of if there is a charging station, people park in that charging station for overnight or half of the day. And so that's the frustration that communities are facing.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I think as the council member who represents the most common ownership communities outside of apartment buildings, maybe, and back in the day, common ownership communities, had banned the deployment of solar, right? And they have a track record of inhibiting progress because either the president or other members of the board didn't like the technology, didn't believe in the technology. And the last thing any of us I know want is a board to say no to any EV charging stations because they don't believe in it or they just don't like the look of it. And so whatever we can do to foster and facilitate.
There's one example of a common ownership community in Clarksburg that succeeded in installing charging, but has since then started to have more resistance from the board and is considering maybe turning them off. And, that would be a really sad thing to see, especially.
Can you expand upon that without naming names?
Yeah, the one challenge on the usage is that if there's a demand charge from the utility that's based on the total amount of energy used at one time, and that can get very expensive very quickly. So if you have 6 vehicles charging all at the same time, gives you a high demand charge. And in order to avoid that, you either have to only allow those chargers to charge slower or restrict the number of chargers that work at any given time, which is a reliability challenge. And the way you fix that is if you have those chargers used enough out, that you actually are recouping enough revenue. But if they're only used a little bit and they're used at the same time and you get a high demand charge, so the economics is really challenging, and especially for a common ownership community they're not professional EV charger managers, right? It's not like what they're focused on, and so if you start getting bills for your utility for the EV chargers that are really expensive, it's no surprise that people are going to say, well, I don't want to just subsidize this, we have to fix it.
This is obviously not now down the road, but in some way, a piece of the economics of this puzzle will be vehicle to grid. We're not there yet, but when you can not only pay money to charge, but make money from having your vehicle plugged in for grid services, the economics are going to totally change. So just putting a pin on it, because that's not the current situation, but I do think some of these challenges are near or midterm until that piece is ready for prime time.
Let me just expand on that. We are planning on that for the depots, the microgrids at the depots, where the buses, when they're not running, actually are doing battery storage or pushing energy back into the grid. So that's one aspect of that that's immediate. But it's been our experience, whenever you aggressively push a new idea and a new technology, you have existing systems that struggle to keep up with them. We ran into that with some of our beloved electric utilities when it came to our aggressive expansion of solar power panels throughout the county, and some of the restrictions, both as a policy and economic standpoint from the electric utilities, and then as laws in the state from Annapolis. So this is another example of trying to apply new technologies to existing power infrastructure, billing methodologies. My point is that this is fast becoming an issue where we have a lot of stakeholders who need to get in a room together and say, if you've got a situation where 5 cars are charging all at once and you're getting a peak demand for that brief period of time, I'm sorry, that's just ridiculous. And I'm sure there's all kinds of rationale for these things, but you're not going to promote new technologies if they're hindered by old policies.
Well said.
Moving on to the next section to focus on the rules and regulations that would apply to community charging here in the county. I won't get too much into the weeds except to say the state of Maryland, or starting at the top, Montgomery County has an ordinance on the books since 2014 that requires a parking facility with at least 50 parking spaces to have one charger for every 50 spaces. That's the only ordinance on the books that governs requiring charging in any facility right now. State of Maryland just had a new law come into effect in October. That means all newly constructed housing units that have a garage, a carport, or a driveway have to have an EV-ready space, EV installed or EV-ready space. And then DPS is working on code amendments for the IGCC, and that would be adopted by May 24. That's a sort of the early stages of this process to propose these now, but that would expand this universe of EVSC ready, EVSC capable spaces to more types of facilities and increase the number there. What the current proposal does not include is EV installed spaces. Instead, saying let's require the property to put the electrical infrastructure in and then have the occupant decide what particular equipment to install. Right-of-way permitting. This was, we adopted a policy in 2021 that would allow residential properties without off-street parking to install a permit in the right-of-way. If you have a garage or a driveway, you can't get that right-of-way permit, but you can get an electrical permit to install it on your property. We've done a little bit of promotion around the right-of-way charging opportunity. Earlier this year, the count of total permits that had been issued was 4. I don't know if additional permits have been sought or issued since then, but it's still, less than a dozen, most likely, around the county. And it may be just the, sort of mismatch between the drivers that are wanting to go electric now and, not having, it may be just looking at not having a parking space and not being aware of this opportunity. But it still is not a cheap prospect to install curbside charging because often you need to dig a trench from your electricals, all the way, across the curb, and that could be more expensive. So I think it's just a more expensive prospect.
Can I also just raise an issue that, because in the city of Tacoma Park, we actually did this a little bit before the county did, and some of the issues that we've run into, which I still think is an issue, though this is anecdotal, is finding contractors who will do this work. Is right. And that is I know a number of people, again, this is just anecdotal, who would really like to do this and ran into just trying to find someone who can assist them in getting the work done.
Yeah, I was going to say in our presentation, our portion of the presentation, that was one of the things that we were going to talk about.
Yeah, okay, great.
So, yes, and from what I've been told and have seen, it's because of demand.
Yeah.
Right, because there aren't enough contractors to do this work, which is a good problem, but also a need for more technical training, and maybe we have a conversation with Montgomery College, right, to see how they can beef up staff in this sector. But the question I have is actually more of a statement. A number of months ago, I received an email from a resident in the county who was trying to get a right-of-way charging station, and she had problems with DPS because she needed, it was not properly conveyed to her about getting a maintenance and liability covenant. And I know no one here is from DPS, but just wondering from your perspectives whether or not this regulation is operating as it should be, and if there's any changes or streamlining, and whether or not there's any changes that need to be done to further facilitate. No. Okay.
Good morning, Marisela Cordova, Montgomery County Department of Transportation, Acting Deputy Director for Policy. So I personally worked with DPS on behalf of MCDOT to develop these EV charging guidelines for residential use in the right-of-way. And yes, there is a maintenance and liability clause in there. We need to make sure it was put in there because we need to make sure that if something happens and we decide somehow that the right-of-way is not safe because the EV charging station is there, we need to be able to have the owner of the EV charging station remove it right away. So that's it. That's the reason. We also, the county is not in a position to maintain these EV charging stations or the right-of-way if it's damaged around these EV charging stations or because of the EV charging stations. So we needed the owner of the EV charging station to be responsible for the maintenance. That's why that is in there, and we believe that that's the right thing to do.
Thank you for that explanation. Appreciate it.
And I can convey your question to DPS and we can get back to you.
Okay, yeah, and so clearly understand the need for it, right? It is public right-of-way, and so want to make sure that liability is taken care of. But if there's any miscommunication or anything else that we can streamline.
Yes, if anyone believes that we need to clarify the guidelines in any way, we can certainly do that with DPS. We thought it was clear, and it's very well written from our perspective. So,
and I presume most of this communication goes through the contractor, right? I mean, because when I had to get my level 2 charger, we actually had to upgrade my electrical box, right? I owned a 1948 Colonial. It was not equipped for an EV charging station, but the electrician managed all those communications and worked with Pepco, and I presume that those are where these conversations take place, unless it's the homeowner.
yes, I think there's two parts there because there is an electric permit required as part of the permit of the EV charging permit. So I don't exactly know if the maintenance probably doesn't really go through the contractor at that point, but just the electrical piece as the installation of it goes.
Thank you, Ms. Cordova.
We had a brief conversation about this when we talked about the pedestrian master plan and the EV stations in the right-of-way.
Yeah.
So how much does it cost to install an EV station in the right-of-way? Does anybody know that?
It really depends. I don't have the actual amount here, but it really depends because sometimes in order to install it, you need to do more work or less work depending on the situation of your house, on the siding of your house. So it's hard to put a number to something like that. It's really evaluated on a case by case, and it really depends. Sometimes people will need to install a driveway, or sometimes they will need to, fix a retaining wall.
Yeah, thank you. And that's what I would expect, that it all depends. And I guess in terms of the number of people doing this or thinking about doing this, having the clause that if this doesn't work, the owner has to take it down, I think that's a pretty big risk from the perspective of typically, if a homeowner gets a permit for something, the government is saying that that's a legitimate place to do whatever you want to do. And in this situation, they get the permit, but then the government has the opportunity to say, well, that didn't work out the way we had it planned, and you have to take it down. And so I think from a transportation perspective and a permitting perspective, the homeowner doesn't have any assurance or guarantee that the investment is going to work out for them.
Well, yes and no. I don't, again, as observed, DPS isn't here. I would assume, because that DPS would have some sort of caveat or clause when one applies to do this that says, oh, by the way, an example, a right-of-way is like an easement. And if we want to construct something over a WSSC easement, for instance, I can build all kinds of things. I can't put footers down into the ground, but I could do all kinds of things with the understanding that if they need to access their property, their pipeline, they're going to tear it up, and not be responsible for replacing it. That's on me. So we have basketball courts, parking lots, and all kinds of things in all of our facilities over PEPCO, WSSC, all kinds of rights of way. And we understand that if they need to go in there and do that, they're going to do their work, and I'm going to have to clean up after them. A lot of times we'll work out an arrangement like this. And granted, most homeowners, this is the only time they're ever going to do something like this. So it's understandable that they would be somewhat shocked and dismayed to find out that they're bearing a risk that they didn't anticipate. A lot of that is simply just being aware. Could it be possible that a road's widened 5 years from now and you have to move your charging? Sure. The likelihood, probably not. But those are the risks you have to run, as we do with anything. And President Glasswood, his example was great with an old house that doesn't possess the infrastructure. That's why the cost of these things depends. I was waiting. At some point, someone's going to ask, what does it cost to put in a charging? And a lot of it depends on, first and foremost, if there's power infrastructure around, and secondly, where is it? If it's across the street, you're going to spend an awful lot of money for your charging station. So all of these things go into play. I think the real issue is probably making sure that the community that's interested in this is well informed, because they may not be.
And I'll raise both the information question and the risk question in DPS and get back to you.
And I'll just add, before we move on, to Councilmember Balcom's point, she raised the pedestrian master plan, and I think the more likely conundrum we'd face is wanting to build a sidewalk where there is an EV charging station. Very similar to the great debates, particularly in the city of Tacoma Park, about maintaining our tree canopy when we want to install solar, right? They are both equal, they are all equally important, but we just have to make some choices sometimes.
One area, the second section on the slide is around commercial right-of-way EV development. And the difference between what you currently have with an EV charger for your personal use versus one that would be for public use that a third party can own and operate and charge money for. Right now, in order to use the right-of-way for commercial use, you require a franchise in the county. We have heard some interest from private operators in installing curbside charging stations. There's a company that has a grant from the state of Maryland to do so. So we're developing a franchise agreement template working with DPS, MCDOT, DGS around what those requirements ought to be. And defining those standards, defining places where that would be appropriate versus not appropriate in an early stage. So that is something that is currently under development and hoping that will probably come before council at some point. And then the final piece around regulations is things that affect the reliability and the experience of the user. And the ZEV strategic plan envisions developing these standards through a multi-department process, making sure that we have input from the community and from the county council through that process. And areas that could be affected are things like charging costs. We spoke earlier about we charge for EV charging in some places it's free. What should be the philosophy around charging in the county, especially in county managed properties? Equity and accessibility on how we direct those investments, parking regulations. Right now, there's a state law that says you can ticket and tow a vehicle, but you have to have appropriate signage. We should make sure that there's clarity around what those parking regulations are, and maybe there is some differences in overnight versus daytime use. Thinking about wanting to make public infrastructure available to a multi-unit dwelling resident. But, these are a lot of complicated things. And then reliability and maintenance, making sure that we have service level agreement with a charging provider that they will fix these chargers in a timely manner. All very important to making sure that this is there. And then I want to also mention public safety, making sure that, if you're using a charging station in a parking lot or parking garage, there's lighting, there's clear ideas of where you go if you need help, and we have a policy around responding to, the safety needs of people. And then finally, we're going to talk about what we're doing to engage the public around EV adoption, and then I'll turn it over to Director Dice to talk about what we're doing on fleet electrification. So the EV Purchasing Co-op, I mentioned, this is our cornerstone of our public outreach around EVs. It's also what we are doing to try to bring the price down for residents however we can. And it starts with a challenge to take the pledge to make your next vehicle an electric vehicle. And then using that combined purchasing power of everybody who's taken the pledge, we can speak to dealerships in our region and encourage them to offer discounts and special offers to say, hey, look at how many residents want to buy an electric vehicle. Do you have something that you can offer them? So far, the response from dealerships has been yes, they do. We can also, through this collection of car buyers, help spread more information, help put people in touch with other opportunities. There's in our newsletter that just went out last week, there's a group of local residents that are trying to use Tesla referral codes to get people free Tesla chargers, and it's something that pay it forward with the referral code that you get. So it's a great local ground up effort. And then we're trying to do events to bring bring EVs to people, let them see them in person. Actually, over 1,200 residents as of today have taken the EV pledge. We've got a pretty good contact list of our newsletter that we put out. There's 8 participating dealers in the dealership incentives, and they're mainly offering the manufacturer incentives, but some are going above and beyond that and offering their own incentives. This all started in last December with the first dealer saying, okay, we'll give it a shot. And now the dealers are really interested and excited to see sales coming through this avenue. And then we've done a number of events this year and last year. Poolsville Day is this great electric vehicle showcase, largest on the East Coast in terms of the number of volunteers who are coming to bring their cars. We had a great event at the Wheaton Building for Greenfest in the city. Then earlier this month, we did an event at an apartment community that was a Frunk and Treat event where we had EV volunteers come out, and electric vehicles don't have a front trunk, so they had the candy in there. Yeah, and it was a great time. We had great feedback from the community about that. And then we've done a number of presentations to common ownership communities about the charging process. That is something that we're happy to do. We were requested by Wheaton Library to do an information session last month. We did that as well, and that was really well attended. So there's a lot of interest in these events and a lot of great volunteers in the region who are just so happy to bring their cars out and be ambassadors for electric vehicles. So it's a great asset. So I want to give a shout out to the EV Owners Association of DC and Poolsville Green for just being great partners in this.
Here.
And that concludes what I have prepared. So thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to try and rock and roll through this.
Yeah.
It's been a good discussion, but it's taken a while, so pay no attention to the agenda. The purpose of this is to just, under the heading of lead by example, to show you what Montgomery County is doing and what we have done, what we are doing, and what we will be doing. And I'm going to turn this over to Fleet Director Calvin Jones, and I will continually prod him to keep going.
Thank you, David. So right now we have 66 charge ports. 4 of them are level 3 chargers, 62 level 2 chargers. We also have 2 solar chargers that we're currently piloting. The photo on the PowerPoint is one of the beam chargers. It gives us the opportunity to move charging where we need it, for a temporary basis and things of that nature.
Can we just pause on that one thing? These are portable units. So we talked earlier, it depends on where the electric is or if it is. And so we've got 2 of these and we're piloting them. If these are as successful as we hope they are, we'll get more. So now infrastructure is not an issue, which is really exciting, and combining both EV charging with our green energy.
Yes. But on the bus charging front, as you guys well know, we have the microgrids, 2 microgrids currently that we're working on. The one at Brookville is already open, 56 dispensers, 2 pantographs there. The pantographs are 450 kilowatt. And the MTOC microgrid, in addition to being able to support the hydrogen production at that location, it'll also support 30 electric buses there it'll have 30 charge dispensers.
And what is a pantograph charger?
A pantograph charger is a charger that on transit buses, you can build a transit bus with charge rails on the roof. And so basically, a pantograph charger you can set them up so that they operate autonomously, that when you pull up under the charge canopy and the bus driver hits the button, the charger comes down to the top of the bus. It allows you to charge at a much higher rate of charge. So compared to, like, say, the 125 or maybe even 150 kilowatt hours or kilowatts that you could charge with in a depot charging configuration on a bus, this will allow you to charge at the one at Brookville at 450 kilowatts, and the one at MTOC will be 360 kilowatts. So you can charge at a much faster rate. You can charge a bus at a much faster rate. So, all right.
I was able to tour the Brookville, and it was fantastic. Can you just mention how it's powered and the solar and the grid batteries?
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do that. We currently have in the county, we're generating 16 megawatts off of solar power in the county right now. That includes 2, and we'll soon bring on at the Oaks landfill 2 additional megawatts for the county use and 4 megawatts of community solar. that has already been fully subscribed. So we're very excited about that. As part of the county's leadership, and this is all summarized in the Green Government Report that I'll make sure the council gets a copy of, are 4 existing microgrids, the correctional facility in North County, the animal shelter, which was really cool because that went online right before an airplane flew into the towers at the airport, and everyone lost power except the animal shelter because it was a microgrid. The public safety headquarters is when we turned that on, the first day we turned that on a few years ago, it was instantly throwing power back into the grid. That's a good story. And then the one that Calvin was mentioned is the Brookville Maintenance Facility, which is internationally known. We've had international visitors coming and touring. It's the first one and only one of its kind. It's the largest municipal bus microgrid charging facility in the country. So just something Montgomery County residents should be very proud of. And then we have plans to initiate in the spring a similar microgrid at our Gaithersburg depot, which will also bring about the eventuality of hydrogen generation.
We've recently had a briefing on that.
Yeah, we did.
Very excited.
Yeah. All right.
All right. So the next slide gives you a brief layout of, or a map of how the chargers are currently laid out within the county for county existing chargers. The red flags are where the existing level 3 chargers are. The yellow flags, the existing level 2 chargers, and the 2 portable solar chargers are both located in locations up county where we didn't have a lot of charging available for end users.
Next slide.
All right. All right, next slide. So for us, when you look at our transit electrification goals, one of the things that's really foremost is acquiring a third facility for transit, just because of the challenges with having a leased facility and being able to do the upgrades to that particular facility necessary to be able to support charging. We intend to leverage a P3 to provide the charging infrastructure and support on a project like that.
We do have a third depot in the works, plans for that now. It will be entirely geared towards electric and hydrogen vehicles. It will not provide for a single diesel vehicle.
All right, so on the light duty side, we've actually been pivoting away from the level 2 style chargers where you install chargers at each facility. And one of the reasons we've been pivoting away from it is because it requires a lot of infrastructure upgrade at each facility. When you start looking at moving forward to get, when you look at scaling to get to zero emissions, the real challenge is scaling up some of those older facilities. We've been, bless you, we've been pivoting toward a depot-based, creating charging hubs. And the reason why we've been doing that is because we can support more end users by targeting zones with charging hubs. So where we can, as Brian mentioned in the grant application, having some of those sites with up to 12 level 3 chargers at a location. The thought process was in looking at the utilization models for our existing county fleet, particularly our administrative fleet, their utilization, our average utilization is probably on our light duty assets, probably about 6,000 to 7,000 miles a year. So far less than what your national average would be. So they're only using the vehicle a couple hundred miles a week. So our thought process was that we could better support them by providing that infrastructure at those locations. And it would take them 20 to 30 minutes to be able to charge, but that 20 to 30 minutes was a commitment, a once a week commitment, as opposed to the additional resource and time and effort it's going to take to put in level 2 charging at each one of the county facilities where all those vehicles domicile. It doesn't mean that we won't on specific cases, visit that. We still look at it on a case-by-case basis. So every time we go to replacing a fossil fuel vehicle with an electric vehicle, if there's an end user that needs to have a charger installed, then that's what we do. So case in point, like corrections, we're not going to have corrections drive out someplace and charge. We're going to put charging at the jail to be able to support the perimeter vehicle. So
Now, the next few slides show sort of a snapshot of the profile of the county's fleet, from light duty, transit related, and fuel types, and heavy duty trucks. We don't need to spend a lot of time on those. What these slides evidence is that we're still growing. We represent sort of a national scale. Only about 3%, 3 to 4% of our fleet is electrically charged currently. It's not for lack of trying. We've certainly at Brookville got a large depot that can charge up to 70 buses, and we've got them on order, but they ain't here yet. Supply chain is a bigger problem there. As more and more municipal fleets gravitate towards electric, the supply chain is going to continue to be a problem because there's just not that many manufacturers of them. And, of course, as you've heard from our briefing before, it's not a single fuel solution. Hydrogen is required, too, for longer routes, and we're doing that. So what I wanted to do, and we didn't actually include this on our slides, is where the county does have an RFP on the that we're waiting on the aforementioned grant funds to become available so we can award a contract. We have a policy now that we put in at least 2 EV charging stations at every new building that we build. I don't really care how big the parking lot is. We want at least 2 charging stations. I really don't like the 1-to-50 ratio. Seems like not really pushing a trend that we ought to push. But anyway, but we also have 400 other facilities that not all of which will ever get a charging station, but many should, because not all of them are manned all the time. They're not staffed on a regular basis. But we should have charging stations at every county facility where people work, because we want to encourage this of county employees as well. So we have an effort to paper the landscape with charging stations, and that you'll hear more about that as it becomes a reality. So in the interest of time, unless council members have a specific question about this, we use all the traditional fuel types. As was mentioned before, we want to make sure, particularly for our hydrogen, that the sources are green. The infrastructure becomes the big challenge at that point, unless we're generating it or trucking it in from another green generation site. And it's been, sadly, by trucking it in, it's not necessarily being trucked in by a hydrogen fueled truck. So cleaning up the supply infrastructure is something in which we are active participants, but not the only participants. So we continue to work on that. Was there something in particular you wanted to highlight, Calvin, about our fleet profile?
I think one of the things that came up was the chargers and maintenance and stuff like that. So one of the things that for us that's been important is the workforce development element. Most of the electric charger manufacturers are starting to pivot to training folks to be able to maintain that equipment, because as you highlighted before, it's not staffing to be able to do it. And so for us, being able to leverage it, both we're looking at, obviously we've developed an apprenticeship program to be able to support our technician transition to zero emissions, but also we've been in conversations with manufacturers to develop training for our existing county electricians to be able to provide provide support on chargers, just because there's just not a resource that's available, or it's limited resources available. So.
But at the same time, we're trying to promote and encourage this as a career option. It's a brave new world.
Yeah.
And I have a son who's interested in getting an automotive engineering degree, and I said, well, this will be interesting to watch as he pursues his education to see, he'll be hands-on what they're training. And he's all jazzed about the new tech and what you can get out of electric vehicles and all. This is the next gen, and we need to tap into that. So that's where we want to make sure we're doing that. And that next slide about working in partnership, as you've heard, there is a common effort across the county government to coordinate our efforts. And but ultimately, it comes down to expanse of the infrastructure and funding to do that. So this is my end cap-off plug. We need money. And we're told all the time that there's money out there. Brian brought that up at the beginning. It's getting our hands on it. It's our big challenge.
So thank you for this. To the point about money, with the Inflation Reduction Act, I know it will be funneling through the state, and I've spoken with folks in Annapolis that they have identified our charging infrastructure as wholly inadequate for what it needs to be. What are the conversations with Governor Moore's team about funneling grants down to us, or are they holding and deploying the IRA funding that they're going to be getting?
So on there's the bipartisan infrastructure law, separate from the IRA. That's where the corridor grant funding NEVI program, administered by the state. There is the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Council organized at the state level that developed a plan and is working sort of together to coordinate around EV charging policy. But the next step will be for the state to release an RFP for this grant funding that they have available. A couple of other states have already awarded projects, so we're waiting for the state to award here in Maryland or to release that RFP. And then they have a number of other grants, maybe through MDE or MEA, that can also support zero emission transportation or charging in different ways. So we look at those opportunities and try to find them as well. But we're engaged in that Zero Emission Vehicle Council, going to those meetings, paying attention to the process. I think what the first thing that's going to happen is that local entities are not eligible for that state administered funding at the beginning. So we will need to be helping private properties that would be eligible be aware of the opportunity, get the word out so that they can, do it, and then just support the process, make sure we're not slowing anything down on the permitting side.
Right, and you just, and I'll turn it over to Councilmember Stewart in a sec. So you just hit on the complexities that I've been hearing, right? Recognizing other states have already deployed the funding and have dispersed it to localities. Maryland hasn't done that, but I'm also hearing that it might not happen, and based on what you just said, the counties are not the first in line for any of this funding. Yeah.
And for the state funding, they deploy it on alternative fuel corridors. That's how they define it. So we have I-270, I-495, and then Maryland State 200 are the alternative fuel corridors in Montgomery County. According to the state's analysis, 270 already meets the minimum standard. So they would not be prioritizing any funding along projects along I-270 in Montgomery County, but maybe along 200 and along 495 potentially. So once the state has certified all of its highways to meet the standard, then they can use that funding for other purposes, and then at that stage, local entities will be able to apply for that funding.
Thank you. Brian, you mentioned before that you are working, coordinating with the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, and I know the last time the staff there presented to the board, one of the things that they were looking at, and we actually had a representative from the Biden administration talking to us, is the possibility of regional grants. And so that localities could come together, so we could actually put in for a grant with like Prince George's or Washington, D.C., particularly given where we are situated and in the Metro D.C. Area, and thinking about these corridors, we may be far ahead for the state of Maryland on 270, but then when we look at our region, there may be opportunities to make that case. So, and I know you're involved in that, but I didn't know if there was anything to report back there or anything we could push on that.
Yeah, council of governments also considered doing a regional grant application for that same CFI program. We were a little bit further ahead in our planning, ready to act on our own, for our own application and with the state level partnership, that we thought, okay, it doesn't make sense to also work on the COG effort as well. But I do believe that they ended up putting in an application, and I think there was even probably some sites that were located in Montgomery County, but were not Montgomery County, purview. So that is an opportunity, and this grant will be released for the next 4 years. And so I think we also, every time we want to look at, is there a regional effort that's going to be more complete, going to be more, working with, for example, WMATA on charging stations at metro stations, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunities to work together on that.
Great. Councilmember Balcom.
Thanks. Thank you. This has been really great, informative, and very timely because we get questions about this all the time from our communities. And clearly the issue is the chicken or the egg in terms of getting the vehicles and getting the network and making sure that we are ready from a network, EV network perspective. Comes down to funding. And I think that the issue of we have a county, the county network that the county has to provide that we need to be engaged in, but then also the private sector, homeowners associations, and the individuals. And that will come down to, well, even for the county will come down to grants, particularly federal grants as they flow through the state. So I think it's just really important for our HOAs to be ready if that funding is available. We talk all the time about when funding is available through grants, the people who need the money the most don't often get it. And so we want to be partners in helping to roll that out, I think is important. I also think that from a funding perspective, it's important that we look at equity areas and keeping in mind that might not necessarily be the highest demand because of the cost of the vehicle. And so as we're doing this dance of making sure the network's available in time for the demand, I think that's just an important thing to keep in mind. And so, and then also looking at whether the industry is ready. We can't get the buses that we've ordered. And so if we expect to get this high demand for vehicles, we have to make sure that the vehicles, that the industry is ready to support those. Nothing we can do about that, but in terms of our investment, we have to make sure that we're not over-promising what we can do because of things that we don't have control over. So I think those are just a lot of things to keep in mind. And I just, and I also we'll talk further about how we can help our HOAs. We have some that are very sophisticated and will be on the leading edge. And then we have some that just have no idea where to begin. So we'll look to you to help make that happen.
I would just recommend a couple of things. Mr. Levchenko in his opening remarks and in his packet brought up something that we haven't really talked about, only peripherally, but it is an issue, and that is the grid infrastructure. As demand increases, does the capacity exist? That's a real issue. We can charge 70 electric buses at the Brookville Depot, but there are more than 70 buses that will operate out of Brookville. And in order to charge those, we need to bring another line in from the electric grid. And there's some question as to whether the electric grid has the capacity for that. Now, we looked at that and we believe it does, or else we wouldn't have done what we did. But that's an issue. And so I would also as we mentioned earlier, with homeowners associations getting struck with extra fees they didn't anticipate, I would just, if council's going to broker some discussions by stakeholders, you have to include the electric companies.
Yeah.
Yep, agreed. Councilmember Stewart.
Great, thank you.
yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Briefly add on the equity considerations, which I agree are incredibly important. With EVs, it's both access to vehicles and chargers, but also localized air quality concerns, right? So it may be that the most equitable thing is electrifying a bus depot for folks who live right near it. Or if you are a public transit rider, by far the most equitable thing will be electrifying the bus as you're getting on and off of it. So I think, again, back to the important air quality benefits of electrification in terms of highly localized air pollution. I think those are both considerations, and the equity in terms of what people are breathing in can be just as impactful.
Great. Thank you for this. I think it was a great presentation and update. As I look at all these slides, I think one of the ones that is probably the most important that I feel like I should keep in my office is slide 10. It's like, where do we need to get moving forward? And particularly, I think we'll know a lot whether or not we get this grant, and we'll hear at the end of December on how easy it's going to be for us to meet those targets. I agree a great deal with what Councilmember Balcom said, and as the council president pointed out, as the district council person who has the most multifamily buildings in her district, this is a huge issue. Huge, and I'd really like to work with you all more on actually thinking of how we're going to advance that. And I know sometimes with vehicles, people talk about the equity issues and the cost of it, but part of the equity issues is also that we have a large portion of our community who are taxi drivers, who are cab drivers, and Uber, and they are driving electric vehicles, and many of them live in multifamily buildings. And so this is a real struggle for them. And so I think really looking at the fact that we have a good portion of people who own these electric vehicles, use them for work, and how are we helping them, where they live. So I think that gets lost sometimes in the equity conversation a little bit. The question I have for you, and I don't know, and you can say that this was sort of a one and done and not really a place where we're going to see a lot of investment or help us in the future. But again, in Tacoma Park, we did have a gas station convert from a gas to an EV charging station. They did it mainly because they were already going to move away from being a gas station. They're also a repair shop, but they really felt they wanted to make this commitment to moving forward. Have we looked at, is this something that would be beneficial to us? Is this, from your perspective, is this nice that we got this one? And this is not a trend that you're seeing, or is one that would be economically feasible for gas station owners to do, or really going to help us meet the demand?
Yeah, it's such a great story, that gas station in Tacoma Park. And I think it's, for some locations, it's going to work out really great for them. I think the economics of it are up in the air, and I can't speak to whether that's going to work for every gas station to switch from fuel to electric fueling. From a user's perspective, you got to think about, you're going to be there for 30 minutes, most likely. Is there other things to do while you do it? You see charging stations at shopping centers or at a mall where you go and you can run an errand, and basically there's no other time out of your day spent. So I think certainly for corridor charging, for highway charging, people, there's gas stations are there for a reason. They've recognized that that's a place where that's going to help. And so I think, in future rounds of grant applications, what would be great to be able to do is open up the universe of sites to private properties and private operators to be able to apply and competitively apply for some of that funding as well through the county, and then let the market determine if that site, if that combination site and operator is economically feasible. And I think from our perspective, getting the word out that this is an opportunity, or helping to understand sort of, hey, you want to transition from gas to electric, here's what it means. There's a lot of things that we could be doing from a communication standpoint there too.
I think there are some gas stations that have already made that transition. So quite a few of the Royal Farms have started making that transition, particularly where they align with where transportation corridors are. I mean, so I think that it's going to happen. It's just it may take them a little while to do it. But there's also newer products that are out there too, as far as chargers that go. There's some chargers now that include battery storage integral to the charger, so that they can actually install it just about anywhere. So if you're a gas station owner, you don't have to take on the upgrading of utility to do it. You buy the charger, and the charger has the battery energy storage in, and they do ultra fast charging with those chargers. So it's I think you're getting at a good spot where there's products that are out there that are available for the gas stations, and as more vehicles start to transition, I think it becomes inevitable, because really the gas for most of those places are loss leaders anyway.
Yeah.
They're selling you everything else behind the counter, so they just want to get you in.
From sort of an overall perspective about the amount of charging we're going to need and what it's going to look like, we are at a very early stage in this changing industry. And 10 years from now, those numbers that you see in the out year projections, a lot of it depends on what that technology is going to look like, how big the batteries are, and how fast they charge, and that's going to determine what that charging experience will need to be. So we need to just keep looking at it, keep understanding the technology, and letting the market kind of shape where some of this charging will go.
Really, really good conversation. Thank you for sharing with us where we currently are and where we need to go. Because if we are to meet our climate goals of eliminating all carbon emissions in Montgomery County by 2035, we got a lot of work to do. And the roadmap you've laid is one that we're going to follow. Recognizing that 42% of our carbon emissions come from the transportation sector, I think the important data points are that only 3% of vehicles in the state of Maryland are electric vehicles, but nearly a third of those are here in Montgomery County. So we are clearly leading the state, but we have more work that we have to do. And if we are to meet those climate goals, we need to have 100% electric vehicle use by 2035. Which will also help meet those carbon emissions by reducing that by nearly a third, 29%. And so the roadmap is ahead of us. We will do everything that we can to encourage the private sector conversion, working with our homeowners associations and common ownership communities. And it is important that these two council members who represent the bulk of that are here. Yeah. And so they'll be running point, making sure that the ease of conversion is just that easy. But let's continue this. And I don't know if Mr. Olchenko mentioned at the beginning, but we are having this conversation today, and then next week we will be having a conversation very similar or at least related, and having a broader conversation about our climate action plan. And at least we've taken 2 hours out of that conversation because we have devoted it to this. But but really important. We have not had this type of conversation in a very long time. So appreciate everyone's engagement. Appreciate all the conversation, and let's keep moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
You didn't just do an extension cord outside.
Yeah.
Which townhomes are doing.
Oh, no, I know. Like,
Across the sidewalk.
yeah,
So
yeah.
if I let me put it this way,
Wait, just remember sometimes.
I turn it off.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. So that might have been possible if I weren't that large. If I were district, that might have been more possible. But
Yeah.
My neighbor, he's retired, doesn't drive around the whole lot, so he just sticks it out of his driveway.
People are doing that.
People do that, yeah. The demand pricing is really interesting.
Yeah, that is exactly.
Well, what they were talking about the carts for, like,
If 6 people plug in their car at the same time.
right, like,
Oh,
so
that is-
if we're gonna
that
be
is
encouraging HOAs and multifamily buildings to be putting in chargers and encouraging them to do it, and then people start doing it, and then they get slammed, like, I actually don't know what the demand fees are, but if they're significant, and now they're doing demand fees, who's paying those?
Well, the HOAs, that's the
The
concern.
HOA. Right.
And Val was texting me in real time saying when she lived in the HOA, people were like, why are we putting in a charging station just for 2 people? But what I told her was those should be, you pay for them, right?
Yeah.
The council, the HOA should facilitate it, but it should be paid, right?
Well, so one of my HOAs.
Thank you,
is
everybody.
Thank
We're continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're on for Thursday, yeah.
Thanks, Eric.
So one of my HOAs was thinking, can we put one in as a revenue generator? Like not even paying for the electricity, but could they charge more than and it'd be a revenue generator? Well, but this is what they're thinking,
Those
you know.
sums who are using EVs, we're gonna.
Because what they thought about was what could we open it up for non-residents? Could we do
So
a
like which
charging?
HOA is this?
This is Germantown Estates
Which is where?
with Clapper Road and Matini.
Okay.
And they're in dire straits financially.
So many of them, it's
And
really bad.
and part of it is the back dues.
Yeah, no, it's really, it's just.
It's bad.
I've got
So-
emails asking if we can help bail out a few.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, yeah.
So they were thinking, well, we could put in a.
I think we're off.
Well, that
So
happened
who's-
before.
So check.
Yeah, no, I'm off.
So that
Should be off live, but the recording.
yeah.
This is what happens in this room.
Who else is? I mean, that one looks like it's. See.
I somehow
Yeah.
it's still. Yeah, okay.
Okay. One more.